At 4:50 in the morning, Iran fired a real strike against an American military base. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued an official statement saying that following American aerial attacks near Bandar Abbas airport earlier that same morning, IRGC forces targeted the American base that served as the origin of the aggression at 4:50. The statement quoted the Quran. It said, "If repeated, our response will be more decisive." And it placed responsibility for all consequences on the aggressor. Within hours, Reuters confirmed that the United States military carried out additional airstrikes on sites in Bandar Abbas that officials said posed a threat to American forces. The US Navy shot down multiple Iranian drones. Iran launched ballistic missiles toward American bases in Kuwait. Kuwait, a country that has been trying to stay out of this conflict, came under missile and drone attack. And somewhere over the Persian Gulf, an American oil tanker tried to transit the Strait of Hormuz with its radar turned off, was stopped by IRGC warning shots, turned back, and the exchange that followed produced another round of strikes and counterstrikes in the darkness before dawn. This is what a fragile ceasefire looks like when it is breaking apart in real time. This is what happens when two heavily armed adversaries with fundamentally incompatible positions about who controls the most important waterway in the world continue to occupy the same dangerous waters. What started as a controlled exchange has the characteristics of something neither side fully intended and neither side now fully controls. I want to give you a careful and honest account of exactly what happened in the sequence of events around Bandar Abbas, because the sequence matters enormously for understanding who did what and why. An American oil tanker attempted to transit the Strait of Hormuz with its radar system turned off. The IRGC Navy detected it, fired warning shots, and forced it to stop and turn back. The American military then struck an area near Bandar Abbas. The IRGC responded by targeting the American base it identified as the source of that strike. The American military then struck additional sites near Bandar Abbas, including what was described as a surface-to-air missile site near Abdul Karimi Air Base and a drone array in a mountain valley north of the city. Iran launched 4 drones at an American warship in the Persian Gulf. The US Navy shot those drones down and destroyed another launch site before it could fire additional weapons. And Iran launched ballistic missiles toward US bases in Kuwait. Each action in that sequence was described by the side that took it as defensive or retaliatory. The American official who spoke to Al Monitor said the strikes were defensive and intended to maintain the ceasefire. Iran's IRGC statement said its response was a direct reaction to American aggression. Both descriptions are simultaneously true from each side's perspective and simultaneously inadequate as explanations for what is actually happening. What is happening is escalation. Slow, incremental, action and reaction escalation of exactly the kind that military strategists have been warning about since the day the ceasefire was announced. Now, I want to step back from the immediate exchange of strikes and place it in the context of the broader diplomatic picture, because the two things are deeply connected, and understanding the connection is essential for understanding where this is going. Trump said several things this week that together paint a picture of an administration trying to hold multiple contradictory positions simultaneously. He said the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open to everybody because it is international waters and nobody is going to control it. He said, in language that was extraordinary even by the standards of this conflict, that Oman will behave like everybody else or we will have to blow them up, adding that they understand that. He said he will not accept a less than perfect agreement with Iran. He said he is giving Iran a brief opportunity at the request of Pakistan's Prime Minister and Army Commander. And he said that what happened in Iran was a change of 2 regimes and now America is dealing with the third. Let me take each of those statements seriously as strategic signals rather than as rhetorical performance, because that is how the people receiving them in Tehran, in Muscat, in Beijing, and in Islamabad are analyzing them. Trump's statement about the Strait of Hormuz being international waters that nobody will control is a direct rejection of the framework that Iran has been building to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the new government agency Iran created to institutionalize its management of the strait. It is also a direct rejection of the reported Iranian proposal that Iran and Oman would jointly manage shipping through the strait as part of a peace deal. Trump dismissed that proposal explicitly. He said the waterway would remain open. The gap between Iran's position that it has the sovereign right to manage traffic through the strait and to charge for that management, and America's position that the strait is international waters that no single country can control, is not a technical disagreement that skilled diplomats can paper over with clever language. It is a fundamental disagreement about sovereignty and about who has the authority to set the rules in one of the world's most critical geographic choke points. That disagreement has not moved 1 inch closer to resolution despite weeks of proposals, counter-proposals, Pakistani mediations, and a presidential visit to Beijing. Trump's comment about Oman is worth examining carefully because of what it reveals about how Washington is managing its relationships with the Gulf states in this crisis. Oman has been the most important quiet channel between the United States and Iran for more than a decade. Oman hosted the secret talks that led to the 2015 nuclear deal. Oman has consistently maintained diplomatic relationships with both sides when other Gulf states have chosen sides more explicitly. And Trump threatening to blow up Oman, even in the context of asserting that Oman must accept American management of the Strait's rules, is the kind of statement that rattles every small state in the region trying to navigate between two much larger and much more powerful adversaries. The diplomatic talks aimed at finding a solution for the Hormuz waterway are reportedly happening in Muscat right now. Sensitive talks in Oman's capital happening at the same time that Trump threatens to blow Oman up if it does not comply. That combination, back-channel diplomacy and public threats directed at the host of that diplomacy, describes an approach to crisis management that is difficult to characterize as coherent. The comment about 2 regime changes and now dealing with the third is analytically significant and deserves careful unpacking. Trump appears to be counting the fall of the Assad government in Syria, the assassination of Ali Khamenei, and potentially a future change in Iranian governance as sequential steps in a broader transformation of the regional order. The framing reveals a strategic ambition that goes beyond the immediate question of the Strait of Hormuz or even the nuclear program. It suggests that Washington's ultimate objective is not a negotiated accommodation with the current Iranian government, but a fundamental change in the nature of the Iranian state. If that reading is correct, it has profound implications for the negotiations, because you cannot simultaneously negotiate a durable agreement with a government and pursue that government's replacement. The Iranians know this. Iran's Deputy Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council said Iran is seeking to free its frozen funds in Washington, and that this is its legal right. That statement, focused on frozen assets and legal rights, is the statement of a government that intends to remain in place and intends to extract the benefits of any agreement it makes. It is not the statement of a government preparing to collapse or transform on Washington's schedule. Let me talk about what is happening in Lebanon, because the military situation there has escalated significantly this week in ways that directly affect the overall trajectory of the conflict. Israeli airstrikes targeted Nabatea. Israeli airstrikes targeted Tyre. Israeli airstrikes hit the Shuifat area in Beirut's southern suburbs, the Dahya in what reports describe as an assassination attempt. Hebrew media reported that the security system is expressing doubts about the success of the assassination attempt. And a separate analysis noted that almost all high-profile Israeli assassination attempts since February have failed, including 2 attempts against Hezbollah's leader, Sheikh Naim Qassem. Hezbollah, according to these reports, has learned from the intelligence failures it suffered during the 2023 to 2024 war and has significantly improved its operational security against Israeli targeting. At the same time, the Islamic resistance announced targeting an Israeli engineering vehicle at the Galilee Forest Camp. A Lebanese army soldier was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Kaframan to Al-Khardali road. A non-commissioned officer in the Israeli Golani Brigade's personnel department was killed by shrapnel, with 7 others injured. And Hezbollah forces targeted Israeli artillery positions in Yaron. This is not a ceasefire. This is a low-intensity war with a ceasefire label that neither side is honoring and neither side seems capable of enforcing. The failed assassination attempt in Beirut is particularly significant because of what it reveals about the current Israeli approach to the Lebanon situation. Israel is conducting targeted killings in Lebanon's capital while a ceasefire is technically in place and while the Knesset is voting to dissolve itself and advance elections. These are the actions of a government under enormous domestic political pressure, trying to demonstrate to its population that it is taking decisive action while simultaneously facing a military and intelligence environment in which the targeted actions are consistently failing to achieve their objectives. 2 attempts on Sheikh Naim Qassem, both failed. An assassination attempt in Dahia likely failed. The pattern tells you something important about the current state of Israeli intelligence on Hezbollah's leadership movements, which is that Hezbollah has successfully adapted its operational security to the point where Israeli targeting information is either arriving too late or is insufficiently precise to achieve the result. That is a significant intelligence defeat in the context of a conflict where assassination has been one of Israel's primary tools. Gaza continues in the background of this larger regional conflict, receiving less attention than it deserves. Israeli army forces attacked 2 prominent members of Hamas in the northern Gaza Strip this week. The conflict in Gaza has never stopped, despite the overwhelming focus on Iran and Lebanon. And the political context inside Israel, 110 Knesset members voting without opposition to dissolve parliament and advance elections, reflects a population that is exhausted by simultaneous wars on multiple fronts. A military dealing with 80% of departing soldiers citing mental distress, and a political system that has concluded the current configuration cannot govern effectively through what has become the most complex and sustained military challenge in Israel's history. Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei delivered a significant speech this week to Iranian parliamentarians that deserves careful reading because it reveals how the Iranian leadership is framing this moment for its own population and its own institutions. He spoke about the current phase as a turning point. He called on MPS to address economic and livelihood issues and to fight corruption and inflation. He specifically mentioned reconstruction of damage caused by crises and wars. He called for resilient economy in the context of national unity and national security as the central focus of legislative work. And he warned explicitly against enemies' attempts to stir up division within society, stressing that preserving the cohesion of the Iranian people is one of the most important factors for strength and stability. Read carefully, this speech is a governing document. It is a supreme leader telling his parliament that the war is entering a phase where economic management and domestic cohesion are as important as military operations. It is an acknowledgement that the war has caused damage that needs to be rebuilt. And it is a warning to potential internal dissidents that division is exactly what the enemy wants, and that unity is the appropriate response. This is not the speech of a government about to collapse. It is the speech of a government settling in for a long struggle and trying to build the institutional and social foundations to sustain that struggle. Let me address the Kuwait situation directly, because it represents a significant geographic expansion of this conflict that has received insufficient attention. Iran launched ballistic missiles toward American bases in Kuwait. Kuwait is not Iran. Kuwait is not a party to the immediate military confrontation around the Strait of Hormuz. Kuwait is a small Gulf state that hosts American military forces under a bilateral arrangement and that has been carefully trying to manage its position between the American alliance structure and its own geographic proximity to Iran. When Iran fires ballistic missiles at American bases in Kuwait, it is not just striking American military assets. It is striking Kuwaiti territory. It is making Kuwait a battlefield in a war that Kuwait did not choose and did not start. And it is sending a message to every other Gulf state that hosts American forces, which means essentially every state in the Gulf, that proximity to American military presence makes you a target. The strategic logic is clear from Iran's perspective. If America can use bases in the Gulf to strike Iran, Iran can strike those bases wherever they are. But the practical consequence is a conflict that is spreading geographically every week, drawing in more countries, more populations, more infrastructure, more complexity. The talks in Muscat are the most important diplomatic activity happening right now, and they are happening with almost no public visibility precisely because that is the only environment in which they can make progress. Qatar has been facilitating. Pakistan has been mediating at the Interior Ministry level as well as the Foreign Ministry level. Oman, despite Trump's threats, is hosting. Iran's Deputy Secretary of the National Security Council is focused on frozen assets. America is focused on the Strait and the nuclear material. The gap between those positions is real. But the fact that the conversation continues in Muscat, even while strikes are exchanged around Bandar Abbas and missiles fly toward Kuwait, is the most important single fact of this week. Because when parties to a conflict keep talking, even while fighting, the possibility of an agreement has not been eliminated. It has been narrowed, stressed, and made more difficult, but it has not been eliminated. What I believe is happening right now, based on all of the evidence available, is that both sides are fighting and talking simultaneously, and that both sides are doing so deliberately. The military exchanges are not accidents. They are pressure. Each side is trying to use military action to strengthen its negotiating position, to signal resolve, to demonstrate that it cannot be coerced into a bad deal by simply absorbing punishment without responding. Iran fires at the American base to show that ceasefire violations will have costs. America strikes Bandar Abbas to show that Iranian provocations will have costs. Kuwait gets hit to show that American Gulf presence is not free. Warning shots force an American tanker to turn back to show that the PGSA framework is real and enforceable. Every military action in the current exchange is simultaneously a tactical operation and a diplomatic signal. And the question that Muscat has to answer is whether the cumulative weight of those signals eventually produces convergence on a set of terms both sides can accept, or whether the escalation ladder, which has already climbed several rungs in the last 48 hours, continues upward past the point where negotiated solutions remain available. The honest answer is that nobody knows. Not the mediators in Muscat, not the officials in Washington or Tehran, not the analysts watching from Beijing or Moscow. The situation has too many moving parts, too many simultaneous pressures, too many actors, each making their own calculations. What I can say with confidence is this: the Strait of Hormuz remains the physical and strategic center of gravity of this entire crisis. Everything else, the Lebanon fighting, the Kuwait missiles, the assassination attempts in Beirut, the Knesset dissolution, the frozen assets, the nuclear proposals, all of it connects back to the question of who manages that 34-kilometer stretch of water and on what terms. Trump says it will be open to everybody because it is international waters. Iran says it manages it through the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Those two positions have not moved toward each other despite everything that has happened. And until they do, every tanker that tries to transit with its radar off, every IRGC warning shot, every American retaliatory strike, every Iranian ballistic missile fired at a Gulf base is one more step on an escalation ladder that neither side has yet found a way to stop climbing. The people of Kuwait did not vote for this war. The Lebanese soldier killed on the Kafirman Road did not choose this conflict. The sailors on the tanker, forced to turn back in the darkness before dawn, did not make the decisions that put them in those waters. The residents of Berbera, watching fuel prices rise because of what is happening 1,500 kilometers away, did not participate in the strategic calculations that produced this crisis. And yet all of them are living with its consequences every day. That is the reality of what large power conflicts do to the world around them. They radiate outward. They impose cost on people who had no voice in the decisions that generated them. And they continue until the parties who do have voice in those decisions find a way to make the costs of continuing higher than the costs of stopping. We are not yet at that point, but in Muscat, in Islamabad, in Doha, and in the back channels that do not appear in any news feed, people are working every day to get there. That work is the only thing standing between the current fragile and violent equilibrium and something significantly worse. It deserves more attention than the missile counts and the drone intercepts. Because in the end, it is the only thing that actually matters.